welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 114. We're closing out September, kind of transitioning into spooky month, I guess, with the music of the Nightcrawlers. So I'm going to give you a second to talk about this, but they are I guess, obscure-ish. I don't actually know how true that is, but a relatively unknown Philadelphia synth trio. And this was your suggestion. So how did the Nightcrawlers get on your radar, Ross?
From the depths of the YouTube recommendations.
There it is.
The algorithm, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, algorithm.
Yeah, the algorithm giveth and taketh away. So, yeah, I just saw this thumbnail of, a cassette art, and it said Space Ritual at St. Mary's. I was like, well, this is intriguing. I like Space Rituals as much as the next synth band. And so I listened to it and I was like, oh, this is pretty good. And I searched the name Nightcrawlers. I was like, holy shit, 30 albums or, 30 tapes. They were very prolific. So I started digging into it more and found out that they're this kind of like underground, but kind of like operated for a long time. So they have a lot of a good body of work. More recently, I found out that they re-released a lot of their recordings on Bandcamp. And so it all started with that one Space Ritual at St. Mary's, which is a great album title.
Yeah, it's funny. And I love the cassette art, at least what's in the thumbnail for YouTube, because it's very just like a castle with lights or a church, I guess, because it's St. Mary's rather. Just very simple, like black and white ink drawing. And to me, it's very 80s, but in the actual 80s sense, I always think of that Lemmy skit where he's like, that's the real fucking 80s. And it's like, everything is like brown and shitty. It's not neon and synth. And
yeah, exactly.
Because, they're just doing it themselves in their garage. So it's not going to be super produced. And it's interesting because they are a band that seems to, at least in the past couple of years, have a bit of a revitalization in terms of popularity. I think one of the members died, so I don't know if they're still producing music.
There's an interview with one of the members from Dave.
That's 2015,
yeah, from 2015, and he said, "I'm 70. I'm not doing this anymore."
yeah. That's sort of what I thought, but you never know because I guess there's some like fan mixes and stuff. But the last big thing is the release we'll talk about today. It's interesting where these bands sort of are big probably in their scene. I'm sure they're probably more influential than we realize just because we haven't really heard of them.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is you also have to keep in mind, like, synth and ambient music and electronica are so prevalent and popular these days. But like back in the 80s, there really was an underground thing. If you were into this, you were really outside of the mainstream and you really had to dig and look for it and use zines and like record stores and mail order stuff and live shows. And you really had to put, you do some work to find this stuff. And so the people did. And there weren't as many groups doing this. And so I feel like this is, there was a smaller number of musicians, but it was just harder to find it. So like, if you weren't in that scene at that time, they fell by the wayside pretty quickly, I would imagine. So, for a certain generation of ambient fans, this was well known, but they disappeared. They didn't promote themselves. They weren't like on tours or anything. It seems to be more like a hobby or, than like, it doesn't seem like they made their living from doing this, but maybe they,
I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe for a few years, but certainly it seems like the band stopped playing because they just got burned out on it after doing it for a decade or whatever. So,
yeah. And they really do fall into, it's funny. Some of the descriptions or fan descriptions or not their official description, of course, is like Philadelphia's answer to Tangerine Dream, which is funny because they were unfortunately never as popular as Tangerine Dream, despite doing really interesting stuff. But they're in that era where they formed as an inspiration to like Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schultz and stuff. Did their first cassette in the 80s. It was two brothers and then another friend, Dave Lunt. That would be the kind of the trio for the next 10 years or so.
By the way, we just recorded our episode on Tangerine Dream for the Night Clerk Patreon. So if you want to hear our thoughts on the iconic band, we recorded right before this episode, so which works out quite well. But yeah, patreon.com/nightclerkradio.
Seamless.
I did look Nightcrawlers Space Ritual at St. Mary's just on its own, and it's actually was in a Audion 28, which is a magazine, the 28th issue, and they released cassettes or a CD with it. It's like a 90 issue, let's see, spring 1994. And so they had like this sampler album to go along with the magazine. And that includes an excerpt from Space Ritual, so which I found pretty interesting. But so like even in '94, people were still talking about it in this like underground, I think UK music magazine.
Yeah.
So
getting to the band themselves, they're interesting because they are very DIY. I don't know, garage punk synth, I guess, in some sense. Because if you read that interview, which it's in Vice, and it's pretty short, so it takes 5 minutes to read. Their procedure is interesting where they basically had a JVC portable boombox. He would put a cassette in, he would put it on record, and then they would just jam until they ran out of tape. It's basically their recording process for a lot of their cassettes. Now, they may have been more structured for the albums they released because I think their discography is technically like 3 LPs and 40 cassettes. And I think those cassettes are kind of the ones that really get bootlegged a lot. But they were just jamming. And you can kind of feel that, assuming that's, I don't know if that's Space Ritual St. Mary's is one of those 40 cassettes or if it's one of the LPs. I assume it's one of the cassettes because it has the cover art similar to some of the other cassettes.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm assuming it's in that group. But it's interesting because we talked a bit about how a lot of Tangerine Dream also improv. And that was sort of the nature of the synths at the time where you didn't have the technology to do a lot of like really detailed tracking like in a DAW. So you would just start turning knobs. And the people that were better at turning knobs than others were the ones that rose to the top. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, they also have this like prog rock influence too, because a lot of their music, especially Space Ritual, had like electric guitar playing through it. And so like they would alternate between live instruments and synths, at least for some of their music. And like they would do like live shows and like at churches. And they specifically chose them for the ambience of these churches and colleges. They wanted it for the ambience and visuals rather than any reason associated with the church. So like those live performances were often things they'd already like rehearsed during their regular recording improv session. So like, hey, let's do that thing we did Friday, and try it again. One of the things I really like is that there's a bit of field recording in a lot of this music because of the way they've recorded it with just the microphones would pick up ambient sounds. Like, oh yeah, if you hear crickets, because there were crickets in the garage or right outside the garage. So
just random talking to each other and stuff, all those good DIY recording artifacts.
DIY
much anymore.
It's very real and like not like pristine studio sounding, but like it still sounds like the sound is actually pretty pristine most of the time. It's not a lo-fi. It doesn't sound like a lo-fi production.
No.
It doesn't have a lot of that artifacting of the cassette, that cassette hiss. I mean, maybe because I was listening to Bioponic more, because that's a very long recording. It's over 2.5 hours, and that's very cleaned up. It sounds very crystal.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to mention next is the other thing that you've sort of found that we're going to talk about is in 2018, they released a big compilation called Bioponic Boombox Recordings. This is a big, long compilation of a bunch of stuff from various tapes. I don't know if it was salvaged from several tapes and put together or other lost recordings. I think it's a lot of just pulled from their cassette catalog.
Yeah, that's what the liner notes seem to be.
Yeah, that's sort of what I got from the liner notes, is that it pulls from their cassette catalog.
So kind of like a best of.
Yeah, I guess it would be like a best of because, God, they had 40 or whatever. So you got to tone it down. And unfortunately, this is like really their...
And those are just the ones they published. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows how many they just sitting in a garage somewhere. So, I mean, we can get into this album. We can talk about it like as an album. Or do we want to do a music discussion of Ritual at St. Mary's first? Because I think that's like the one whole cassette I listened to. And I'm sure if I dug around on YouTube, a lot of those other cassettes somebody digitized. Probably the same channel that did.
Yeah, you can find a lot of their other stuff on YouTube. Like if you type in Nightcrawlers album, like you'll pull up a bunch of stuff. And their cassette, art is pretty recognizable.
Yes.
So that's not a problem. But no, Bioponic is really, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was when I started listening. It's like, I was listening to it on the Bandcamp page and it was like, this is really fucking good. I'm just going to buy this album because I just want to have it. And
Mm-hmm.
because there is a lot of variety in their performances. Like, it's clearly ambient, but like it kind of varies a lot, right? Like in terms of the style, and they're not just doing soundscapes. There's a lot of like intricate kind of melodies and like arpeggios that they're like, and there's some stuff that's I would categorize more as synthwave that is like ambient or anything. Like there's some real high energy tracks.
Yeah. And it makes sense that across several recordings, if it's a compilation, would be all over the place. Because even like Space Ritual at St. Mary's is not in a bad way, but has multiple stylistic shifts throughout it, where a lot like this, there's big whole like 20-30 minute blocks that are just like super cosmic synth spacey of that era. And then in Space Ritual, one part that's out to me is that, guitar comes in and then there's just like guitar noodling for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Of just like soloing over synths, just going for it.
Yeah. I think the thing is Bioponics is, taking from multiple, like obviously a lot of different sessions over a period of years, but like Space Ritual is one performance. And so like the beginning and end are more like, it's all like, there's more of a through line in Space Ritual. You can see how it starts and how it progresses, but like it's still building on what has come before. But like all these Biophonic tracks are all very disparate,
Yeah.
So
we'll just go into it. Starts off track 1, which is actually at 4 minutes, one of the shorter tracks on the collection. I was surprised at how ambient it is. It's a very like space ambient. There's like intermittent beeping of like something communicating, not like a rhythmic musical beat, but like a antenna beeping or sending out some signal. There's like windscapes. There's just drone and sound. There's not a whole lot of other like synth music coming in. It is just like a soundscape piece.
Yeah. This is music from the hearts of space. This is some real like cosmic space ambient. Yeah, which continues with track 2, which is more very primo space ambient. It's very good beat boops, I have to say.
This comes into more what I was expecting going in, not knowing much about them, which is ambient, but a lot of that, given their inspiration, that Berlin sequencer of just synth little arpeggios kind of going, like little sequencers going over not exactly what was established in track 1, but sort of like an underlying synth drone landscape. This is also, I had not looked at the track lengths. This is why I realized I was like, oh, this is longer than I thought, because track 2 is just kind of going and going and going. You're not really thinking about it. You're not mad. You're not like, oh, this is worn out. It's welcome. But
yeah.
You're like, oh, it's 11 minutes.
It's got this like droning loop quality, like a lot of, which is common throughout a lot of these tracks, is they come with this real intricate kind of, loop, and it just kind of keeps going, but like it hooks you.
Yeah.
And you don't get bored of it because it has like this kind of interesting structure to it. So, and then when it changes, you really notice it too. So like track 3 is more exploration of these cosmic spaces, but it's really starts building up, especially in the second half. Gets very intense. Yeah,
more instruments come in. It slowly gains more structure. It's some of the synths that come in are a little harsher, not in a bad way, not like crazy noise, but they just have a different timbre that's not as soothing.
Yeah,
to them, like around like 10-ish minutes.
Which
a professional would play a sample here, and we're professionals, so that's what we're gonna do. So that's a bit from around 9 to 11 minutes. In track 3, Geisterblitz, I guess. I don't know.
Very Berlin school.
Yeah. Just these synths come in there a little whinier, a little different in their timbre. And these first 3 tracks, I sort of wish, or maybe they're more detailed liner notes with like the LP or something, if these do come from the same cassette, or at least how close they are in time, because they do feel connected more so, where some of the other tracks, there's sort of an obvious jumps in style where it's like, oh, it wouldn't surprise me if this is 2 or 3 cassettes later. Mm-hmm. But these first 3 tracks really form a coherent side of a cassette.
Yeah. I think, you're right. There is kind of like these groupings of tracks that have particular styles to them. The next track, I think, is maybe my favorite track on the album. It's really fucking good.
It's good.
Yeah. Crystal Loop 3. It's got this really interesting crystalline sound that's intricate and very precise kind of, but it's still a loop. It's still like, it's very complex, but it's still like this hypnotic kind of drone. Man, I love it.
I like it too. It also is what I was talking about with being a break in style from the first 3. Mm-hmm. It's like the synths are different. It feels more like fantasy dungeon synthy.
Yeah.
Than space cosmic, and, kind of using these genre terms to just describe like the vibe of each track. But it does definitely change. And that's sort of when you can maybe notice that, oh, I just sat through like 20 minutes of awesome space ambient and didn't notice, because now I'm getting crystally synth arpeggios.
Yeah, but the dungeon synth came to me in this album too. A little later, I was like, "Holy shit, they're doing dungeon synth and space ambient and synthwave, and like, holy shit, you get everything with this."
Yep. So like track 4 and 5 are more in this like crystalline kind of synth dungeon synthy mode to me. They feel very fantasy exploration, that sort of vibe. But then like track 6, Zeitgeber, which is listed as a bonus track. I don't know what's a bonus track for. It's 25 minutes, so it's a hell of a bonus. It's a big old bonus. But that one, being such a long track, it explores a lot of ideas. But that one goes back to being like, it's almost like a Giallo soundtrack, like nature sounds. There's kind of like creepy little noises here and there. It's a little unsettling. Stuff kind of comes in and out. It's much more ambient.
Yeah.
Much more back to being more of a soundscape and less clear, like melody loop driven. It's much more of like a creepy feel.
Yeah. And that sort of darkness continues on to the next track.
Yep.
Which is very mournful. It's like this dirge in the howling waste. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit shorter, but Reprieve doesn't feel, that's track 7's title. It is also another bonus track, but like, it doesn't feel like much of a reprieve. It feels more like a funerary procession. So you have some doom.
Yeah. Doomy, darker, like the earlier track. There's like skittering and bugs and other unsettling type noises. Think about that track into the next track. That's where there's like feels like there's a clear break, because every so often these tracks, so track 4 is one of these, track 8 is another one of these, where it feels like you're kind of starting over because it has more of like a proper intro. So track 8, Sizzling Highs, starts off with like drums with like kind of intricate like hi-hat work. I don't know if those are your sizzling highs, if it's literal. And then it's much more into like, I don't like to say synthwave. I don't know why. It feels icky to me.
Because the synthwave is so commercialized as a term.
It is. Yeah. It is. It makes me think of like an hour-long AI mix or something on YouTube.
Yeah, no shit.
But it has more like synth leads coming through. It feels, the thing about this, and I don't know if this is like some Ouroboros of influence where I've worked this backwards in my head, or if this was artistic intent, forward at creation. But a lot of these tracks, like especially Sizzling Highs, feels very cinematic to me.
Yes.
And I've talked about this before, where I don't know, I'm assuming it's just because I watch so many movies. That's like some weird brain rot, but I almost like immediately map this type of stuff into like cinematic images.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think like we talked about extensively on this podcast, the link between cinema soundtracks and synth music in particular is so deeply linked at this point. It's impossible to avoid. Yeah, I listened to track 8 and I was like, God damn, is this a B-side from a Doctor Who episode soundtrack from like 1986 or something? Like, it's very adventurous. It's like, obviously this band was heavily influenced by Tangerine Dream and the Berlin School, but like they were Doctor Who fans. They were getting some Tom Baker episodes and jamming into that. Cause like, holy shit, this is just impressive.
Yeah. And this sort of modern cinematic synth feel continues on track 8, Transonic, which you get a little bit of that DIY, you get talking, they get them counting themselves in, you get a little 2, 3, 4. But then it's like very driving, like action synth.
Yeah, it's actual
sci-fi action
synthwave. But yeah, good drum rolls. Yeah, I love it.
There's just like a pulsing. I've talked about this before, but I associate strongly with like there's like a kind of like driving effect that's from that era that I associate strongly. I think that's from the Terminator soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
In my head, that sort of rhythmic pattern, then kind of like with like, oh, I'm being chased by a killer robot. Association in my brain, not necessarily a direct installation. But then, we kind of have yet another tone shift, right? When we get to track 11. So there's like that 8-9 kind of like action synth period after our 6-7 jello. Yeah. Then Baba Yaga's Flight, which is high energy, more like exploration, more back to kind of the fantasy feel almost, or mysterious. Lots of like weird little slide whistle effects.
Yeah, Baba Yaga's Hut made me really think of that's when I was like the dungeon synth thing really like clicked. Like, holy shit, they're doing dungeon synth too. It's a great track. It's also it's like a 11-minute track. There's a lot going on.
And then I think it's hard to say a favorite track. I know you gave yours as Crystal Loop. It's hard for me, but like track 11, Spring Torsion would be up there because I just really like those like drony, deep, like long attack synths. Like you hear this a lot. Blade Runner is like kind of the cliche, but it comes up a lot again in like John Carpenter soundtracks. In Terminator, that 84 soundtrack is very underappreciated as like a synth soundtrack. I don't know if it's underappreciated. The theme song is obviously very popular, but there's a lot of great other work where you get like a deep, low kind of rumbly synth. There's like a little low frequency oscillators, little LFOs on it that kind of make it like pulse very slightly. And it just kind of sits under everything. That timbre and that sort of patch style always is very appealing to me.
Yeah.
And when you get it for 18 minutes as a bonus track, it's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting because then you go to like track 12 and it's completely different again. It's like little crystally synths and piano and back to like,
more cosmic stuff.
More cosmic exploration fantasy. Which one is it? Barriers, I think, is the next track, which again, I don't know if we're getting towards the end, like, oh boy, we got to put in some other stuff. But this has like more string simulating synths. It almost sounds like it's obviously synths, but it feels more like pizzicato strings, like when you're plucking them versus bowing. Something.
It made me think of Unsolved Mysteries. I'm going to be honest. It's kind of like an investigative, like what's going on here kind of music. And
it's very poking around a warehouse music
with a flashlight. Yeah. It's good.
We should do a compilation of all the times I describe music in a way that sounds insulting, but is actually a compliment. It sounds like music you'd explore a warehouse to. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
But somebody might not know that with no context.
Yeah. If you could make music that instantly evokes an incredibly specific image or scene, like that's good. Like that's harder to do than you would think, without just ripping something off. Because it's original. It's not just like ripping off an existing thing. It's like it found its own path to the warehouse instead of just like imitating generic music that like a lazy show or movie would do.
Yeah. And then we end our boombox recordings on track Lucky 14, which is just 3 minutes of like piano warm up, discordant piano noodling.
Yeah. It's very lovely. And I just, the little bow that for me is the kid being, that tell, all right, hit the stop button and he's at this spot. And then the recording is, it's like, oh, that's adorable. Yeah.
It's definitely very in that style of, they said in the interview, stick the boombox into the side of the garage and just record because you can hear like people walking around. They probably didn't intend it to be a track, maybe, but it's like, it's very, I'm tuning my guitar.
Yeah, it's a nice little way to wind down from such a incredible long odyssey for going from, space to Baba Yaga's hut to a warehouse. Just had such a long journey. It's nice to wind down.
Very tired.
Yeah.
Very EP.
Yeah, it's just that Nightcrawlers. It reminds me that like, there's all of this out there. There's a lot of great art, a lot of great music that is just waiting to be discovered or rediscovered. And they had a long and fruitful career creating this music, and they were done with it just amicably. And that's fine. Just to work in some sort of field for a number of years to be like, yeah, I've done all I can in this. I'm done. And let this work stand for you. And I'm just really glad that people went to the effort of preserving it and cataloging it, and then of course creating this really nice collection of music so that it's preserved. Because I would hate for for them to work so long and then them not be digitized and preserved so that we can find it later on. Yeah. But yeah, it's not every electronic group is Tangerine Dream. For every Tangerine Dream, there's 100 Nightcrawlers out there.
Yeah. It's always just some unfortunate luck of the draw of who gets picked up by Friedkin and
yeah, no shit.
Who makes 40 awesome cassettes in a garage in Philadelphia.
Yeah, here's to the mid list of working artists.
Yeah, so this is a phenomenal release. Should definitely be supported. And little call to action is if you think of like other similar level or maybe even less well-known bands like this that are maybe local to your area, you don't know if other people are doing it, let us know. Hit us up on like Twitter or one of our many methods of communication and recommend some of this, because I'm happy the YouTube algorithm got it, but I don't want to rely on it. I want people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want a community of recommendations.
Yes.
Because if the remaining Nightcrawlers are listening to this, which I'm totally sure they are, do more these tape compilations.
Oh, I'd love to, see a second volume of the boombox recordings.
Or like, I know it's a lot of work, but also it doesn't have to be that high quality, but just digitize all them tapes. I'm sure there's like have you looked to see if there's like a torrent of like all their tapes digitized somewhere?
I have not looked. I do remember one of these articles talking about, someone sent me a link to a download of their entire archives. And I'm like, well, where is that link? There are things like the Underground Music Archive and other sort of websites that are trying to preserve all this stuff. And it's just a matter of finding it. Yeah, the Internet Underground Music Archive. Oh, it's already went down, but it's archived on. It's mirrored on archive.org.
Okay. It's out there.
Yeah, it's out there somewhere. So you just gotta look for it. Yeah. In fact, here, let me do a search for Nightcrawlers.
Fire up the warehouse flashlight music for your little search.
Yeah, that's what we did. It's not pulling up anything, but I'm probably not searching it right. So yeah, it'll be an ongoing thing. But if you're familiar with it, you'll hopefully let us know.
Thank you so much for listening. It was really fun to dig into the semi-discography of obscure synth music. So the Nightcrawlers definitely going to be on my check out other cassettes on YouTube list and see what's out there. But next episode, we're going to be firmly in October, which means it's time for themed episodes. So we're going to get into some Vacation Bible School because, as we all know, Halloween is a deeply evil and satanic holiday. So we're going to do the Vacation Bible School Satanic Panic series. I don't know if we're going to do all 5 of them. We're going to figure out what we want to talk about, but we're going to get into some Satanic Panic music, Ross.
Hell yeah. I mean,
Satanic Panic Vaporwave.
As an RPG fan, I'm all about the Satanic Panic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is sort of what inspired this, is that around this season, a lot of these YouTube channels that upload cassette rips, like VHS cassettes, boy, we produced so many Satanic Panic VHS cassettes in the 80s and 90s, and they have just been throwing these up. It's just 30 minutes of 2 people sitting around like, the internet harvests Satan because the S and HTTPS is for Satan. And it's like, beautiful. I love this.
Yeah, there is like this whole media industry that caters to all of these churchy evangelical
it's very sheltered, have never left their hometown.
Yeah, it's a grift, and they've just gone from, I mean, back in the 80s, there's from D&D and heavy metal to Pokemon and Harry Potter. Yeah, it's wild.
I know this is the outro. I'll save it for the episode, but I have some favorite fucking scenes from some of those VHS. So I think we're gonna talk about Satanic Panic maybe broadly, and definitely Vacation Bible School's awesome albums about it.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah. But if you like that, you like what we do and you want to hear more, we have over 40 bonus episodes now on Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com. As Ross pointed out, our most recent was about Tangerine Dream. So, we really keep the obscure bands for the Patreon paywall to really get people in. We talk about the mainstream bands like the Nightcrawlers on the public feed. Good marketing. You can also find us at Night Clerk Radio, basically anywhere, at gmail.com. If you want to email us your obscure synth recommendations, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc., whatever works for you. Wherever you do choose to check us out, take a moment and hit whatever little algorithmic signifier that site has. It helps out more than you realize and more than I realize. And we always advocate building community. So talk to people, make friends, make frenemies, share your love of awesome music with them. And hopefully we get to be part of that. So thank you so much again for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.